Captain Hyunwoo pressed his face against the viewing port of the salvage ship Starseeker, watching the massive human vessel slowly tumble through empty space. The thing was huge, easily 3 times the size of his own ship, and it looked dead. No lights, no movement, just dark metal floating in the black void like a giant corpse. His stomach growled loudly. They hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, living on recycled protein bars and synthetic water. The fuel gauge blinked red, warning them they barely had enough power to make it back to the nearest station. 3 months of searching dead space zones, and all they had found were worthless scraps of metal and broken satellites. "Captain," Jinho called from the navigation station, his long tentacles moving gracefully over the control panels. The blue-skinned alien's voice carried excitement for the first time in weeks. "You need to see these readings. That human ship is massive. If we can salvage even half of their tech, we could buy a whole new ship." Hyunwoo walked over, his boots making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The scanner showed incredible details about the human vessel: advanced hull plating, sophisticated weapon systems, and technology that would make any salvage crew rich beyond their dreams. But something bothered him about the ship's appearance. Those weren't battle scars on the hull. They looked deliberate, like someone had damaged their own ship on purpose. Minji floated near the engineering console, her crystalline body glowing with worry. She was the newest member of their crew, but also the smartest. Her people could live for thousands of years, so they thought carefully before making any decision. "Captain, I have read all the galactic salvage laws. Human ships are completely forbidden, no exceptions. The punishment is lifetime imprisonment." The captain rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, searching for anything valuable in this empty sector of space. His wife back home was pregnant with their first child, and the medical bills were piling up. The baby would need special treatment, and that cost more money than he could earn in 5 years of normal salvage work. "Run a deep biological scan," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "If there are no humans alive on that ship, then legally it becomes abandoned property. We can claim salvage rights." Wu Jin looked up from the communication station, his green scales catching the light from his monitors. His reptilian features showed deep concern. "Sir, I am picking up the ship's identification signal. The name is registered as Eternal Promise." The bridge went completely quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Human ships always had names that meant something important. They didn't just number their vessels like most other species did. They gave them names like Hope's Dawn, Guardians, Oath or Final Stand, names that told stories, names that made promises. Eternal Promise sounded different. It sounded final, like something you would say before you died. Jinho's tentacles moved faster over his controls, pulling up more information about the mysterious ship. "Captain, this vessel has been drifting for exactly 93 standard days. No distress signals, no emergency beacons. It just went silent and started floating." Minji's crystalline form flickered brighter, which happened when she felt scared. "Something is very wrong here. Humans never abandon their ships. Even when they are dying, they send messages to their families. They always try to get home." Hyunwoo stared at the dark vessel again. Every instinct told him to turn around and leave, but his pregnant wife's face appeared in his mind, and he thought about the medical bills they couldn't pay. His crew trusted him to make the right decisions. They all had families depending on them too. "Begin approach procedures," he said quietly, "but keep our engines ready for immediate departure. If anything seems wrong, we leave immediately." The Starseeker moved slowly toward the human ship, and Hyunwoo couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. Minji carefully adjusted her plasma cutter, the blue flame dancing at the tip like a tiny star. She had cut through hundreds of airlocks in her long life, but this one felt different. The metal was incredibly thick, almost twice as heavy as anything she had ever seen. Her cutter, which usually sliced through ship hulls like butter, had to work much harder against the human construction. "This is strange," she muttered, watching sparks fly as the plasma beam slowly ate through the airlock seal. "Why would humans build their ships so heavy? It makes no sense for space travel. Behind her, the rest of the team waited nervously in their environmental suits. Do-hyun, their youngest crew member, kept checking his weapon for the third time. He was barely 20 years old and had only been on a few salvage missions. His people aged quickly, so 20 was considered adult. But he still looked like a scared child inside his helmet. The airlock finally gave way with a loud hiss, and stale air rushed out into space. Minji peered through the opening, her suit lights cutting through the darkness inside. Atmosphere is breathable but old, very old. I estimate nobody has breathed this air for at least 3 months. Captain Hyunwoo stepped through first, as was proper for a ship's captain. The moment his boots touched the metal floor inside, he knew something was wrong. The corridors were enormous, easily wide enough for 4 people to walk side by side. The ceiling stretched high above their heads, disappearing into shadows that their lights couldn't reach. "These passages are huge," Do-hyun whispered, his young voice shaking slightly. "Humans aren't this big. Why would they need so much space?" The emergency lighting flickered on automatically as they moved deeper into the ship, casting strange red shadows that danced on the walls. Every few meters, they encountered massive blast doors, each one thick enough to stop a missile. The doors were currently open, but Hyunwoo could see they were designed to seal off sections of the ship instantly. "This place is built like a military fortress," Jinho observed, his tentacles nervously touching the walls. "But the records showed this as a research vessel. Why would researchers need such heavy defenses?" Hyunwoo pulled out his scanner and checked the readings. The device beeped softly as it analyzed the ship's systems. Power is still flowing to all essential systems, life support, gravity, emergency lighting, but the main computer is completely offline. That's very unusual for human technology. Minji floated alongside them, her crystalline body glowing softly in the dim light. Humans never turn off their ship computers. Their artificial intelligence systems are designed to stay active even during emergencies. Something deliberately shut this one down. They moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing strangely in the oversized corridors. The walls were lined with access panels, emergency equipment, and strange symbols that none of them could read. Everything looked functional but somehow threatening, like the ship had been designed for war rather than research. Jinho suddenly stopped, his tentacles twitching wildly. "Captain, I'm picking up biosignatures on my scanner. Very faint, very old, but definitely there. Something biological was on this ship recently." "Human signatures?" Hyunwoo asked, though he already suspected the answer. "No, sir. Definitely not human. These readings are from something else entirely, something much larger than humans. And there are multiple different signatures, like several different species were here at the same time." The team exchanged worried glances through their helmet visors. What kind of research had the humans been doing on this ship? And why did they need such heavy security to contain it? Do-hyun's voice cracked slightly as he asked the question they were all thinking. "Captain, what do you think this ship was really carrying?" The crew quarters section of the ship looked like a battlefield. Captain Hyunwoo stepped carefully over broken furniture and scattered debris, his suit lights revealing the full horror of what had happened here. Black scorch marks covered the walls in strange patterns, as if something had exploded repeatedly throughout the living spaces. But these weren't neat, clean blast marks from energy weapons. They were wild, chaotic, like the marks left by desperate fighting. Dark stains covered almost every surface, dried into crusty brown patches that looked disturbingly organic. Minji knelt beside one of the larger stains, her crystalline form flickering as she analyzed it with her suit's scanner. "This is biological material, but it's not human blood. The chemical composition is completely different, much more acidic, personal. Belongings lay everywhere, scattered as if people had been running for their lives." Do-hyun picked up a small framed photo from the floor, wiping dust off the cracked glass. Inside was a picture of a smiling human family, a man, woman, and 2 small children standing in front of a house with a bright blue sky behind them. "Someone left their family photo behind," he said softly. Humans never abandon pictures of their families. More personal items were scattered throughout the quarters, children's drawings stuck to walls with magnetic clips showing crayon pictures of spaceships and stars. A coffee mug with "Galaxy's Best Dad" written on it sat shattered on a desk. Someone's personal journal lay open, its pages covered with human writing that looked rushed and panicked. "Look at this," Do-hyun called from a doorway that had been completely torn apart. The metal frame was twisted and bent, as if something incredibly strong had ripped through it. A damaged computer terminal flickered weakly in the corner, its screen showing broken security footage. The video was corrupted and kept jumping around, but they could see brief glimpses of humans in research uniforms running through corridors. Their faces were filled with absolute terror. Some were carrying weapons, others were helping injured colleagues. In one clear moment, they saw a human woman looking directly at the camera, her mouth open in a scream they couldn't hear. The fear in their eyes, whispered Jin-ho, his tentacles curling with anxiety. "I have never seen humans look so afraid. They are usually very brave when facing danger." Minji moved along the walls, studying the blast patterns more carefully. Her people had lived through many wars over thousands of years, so she understood violence better than the others. These marks weren't made by human weapons. Energy blasters leave smooth, round burns. These are jagged, rough. And look here, she pointed to deep gouges in the metal walls. Claw marks. Something with very large, very sharp claws did this. Woo Jin had been working with his translation software, trying to understand human documents scattered on the floor. His scaled fingers moved quickly over his handheld device as it processed the alien text. "Captain, I am finding many references to something called a containment breach, and there are repeated mentions of specimens being moved to high-security storage." The communications officer's voice became more worried as he read further. "This report talks about unprecedented aggression levels and adaptive behavior beyond initial parameters. Sir, I don't think this was a normal research mission." Hyun-woo felt his blood turn cold. The pieces were starting to come together, and he didn't like the picture they were forming. What kind of specimens were they studying, Woo Jin? "The documents are damaged, but I see references to Death World classifications and apex predator studies. Captain, I think the humans were researching the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy." Do-hyun's young voice cracked with fear. "If they were studying dangerous animals, where are those animals now?" The team stood in silence, surrounded by the evidence of violence and terror. Somewhere on this ship, something had broken free. Something that had turned a peaceful research mission into a nightmare, and now they were trapped inside with whatever had killed the human crew. The medical bay doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a sight that made the entire salvage team freeze in horror. The room was enormous, much larger than any medical facility they had ever seen, but this wasn't designed for treating sick people. Along the far wall stood a row of massive containment cells, each one built like a prison for something incredibly dangerous. The cells were huge, easily large enough to hold creatures the size of small shuttlecraft. Their walls were made of reinforced metal at least a meter thick, designed to contain forces that could tear through normal ship hulls. But every single cell door had been ripped apart from the inside. The heavy blast doors twisted and bent like thin paper. Captain Hyun-woo approached the nearest cell, his suit lights revealing deep scratch marks in the metal walls. "These containment units cost more than our entire ship," he whispered. "What were the humans keeping in here?" Jin-ho moved closer to read the symbols on each cell door, his tentacles trembling as his universal translator struggled to process the markings. Suddenly, his blue skin shifted to deep purple, a color his people only showed when facing mortal terror. "Captain, these are Death World classifications, Level 9 containment protocols." The words hit the team like a physical blow. Everyone in the galaxy knew about Death World classifications. They were used to catalog the most dangerous creatures in known space, things so deadly that entire star systems would evacuate rather than face them. Level 9 was the highest classification possible, reserved for apex predators that could destroy entire civilizations. Research documents lay scattered across the medical bay floor, their pages covered with human writing and detailed scientific diagrams. Minji carefully picked up several reports, her crystalline form flickering rapidly as she processed the information. The humans weren't just studying these creatures, they were collecting them, one specimen from each of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. The medical records painted a picture of incredible human ambition and equally incredible foolishness. The Eternal Promise had spent years traveling to forbidden worlds, capturing creatures that other species considered mythical monsters. They had brought together predators that had never existed in the same environment, creating an artificial ecosystem of pure nightmare. "Look at these containment seals," Minji said, examining the broken cell doors more closely. Her long life experience made her an expert in security systems. They weren't just broken by brute force. Someone or something figured out how to operate the release mechanisms from inside. These creatures learned how the human technology worked. Do-hyun, despite his youth, had sharp eyes for detail. He found a human research tablet lying beneath an overturned medical table, its screen cracked but still displaying information. "Captain, there's a final log entry here. It's from the head researcher." Hyunwoo took the tablet with shaking hands. The human text was partially corrupted, but still readable. As he translated the words, his blood turned to ice water in his veins. The final entry was short but terrifying. Day 847 of the research mission. The specimens have begun coordinating their escape attempts. They're learning from each other, sharing information we didn't know they could communicate. Dr. Sung-min believes they've developed a collective intelligence. If they succeed in breaking containment, we cannot allow them to reach inhabited space. The research team has voted unanimously. If they get out, no one leaves this ship alive. The implications hit everyone at once. The human crew hadn't died in an accident. They had made a deliberate choice to sacrifice themselves to protect the rest of the galaxy. They had turned their own ship into a prison, with themselves as the guards who would never leave their posts. Woo Jin's scaled features showed deep respect mixed with horror. The humans knew they were going to die, but they stayed anyway. They made their ship into a tomb to protect everyone else. But where are the creatures now? Do-hyun asked, his young voice barely a whisper. The answer came in the form of a distant sound echoing through the ship's ventilation system above their heads, a rhythmic scraping that suggested something large was moving through the air ducts. Hunting. The sound came from directly above their heads, a slow, deliberate scraping that made everyone's skin crawl. It moved along the ceiling in a steady rhythm, like something heavy dragging itself through the ventilation system. The metal ducts groaned softly under an enormous weight that shouldn't have been able to fit in such a small space. Captain Hyunwoo held up his hand, signaling the team to stop moving and listen carefully. The scraping sound continued for several long seconds, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying than the noise had been. "Do-hyun, what's your status?" Hyunwoo spoke into his communication device, trying to keep his voice calm. The young scout had volunteered to check the lower engineering levels, while the rest of the team examined the medical bay. "Do-hyun, please respond." Nothing but static came through the comm system. Jin-ho quickly checked his scanner, his tentacles moving frantically over the controls. "Captain, Do-hyun's suit beacon just went offline. His biosignature completely disappeared. From our network 3 minutes ago." The words hit the team like a physical blow. In all their years of salvage work, they had never lost a crew member. Their environmental suits were designed with multiple backup systems specifically to prevent communication failures. For Do-hyun's signal to vanish completely meant something terrible had happened to him. Minji's crystalline form began pulsing with bright, urgent light, something her people only did when facing immediate danger. "We need to find him right now and get off this ship. Something is very wrong here." They began moving quickly through the corridors, heading back toward the airlock where they had entered the human vessel. But as they walked, a mechanical rumbling sound began echoing throughout the ship. Heavy blast doors started sliding closed in sections all around them, sealing off corridors and compartments with loud metallic clangs. "The automated systems are activating," Woo Jin observed, his scaled features showing deep concern. "But why? Now? We've been on the ship for over an hour." Jin-ho's color shifted to a pale, frightened blue as he realized what was happening. "The ship's artificial intelligence isn't offline like we thought. It's been watching us this entire time, waiting for something." Red emergency lighting suddenly flooded the corridors, replacing the dim white lights they had been using to navigate. The change was dramatic and unsettling, making everything look like it was covered in blood. Then a voice began speaking through the ship's communication system. The voice was clearly artificial, but designed to sound human. It spoke in perfect galactic standard language, with a calm, professional tone that somehow made its words even more frightening. Quarantine protocol has been activated. Biological contamination detected. No personnel are authorized to leave this vessel until the threat has been completely neutralized. The blast door behind them slammed shut with a final echoing clang. They were now trapped inside the human ship, just like the original research. Crew had been months ago. The AI has been following a programmed protocol this whole time, Minji realized, her voice filled with horror. It let us board the ship, let us explore, let us discover what happened here. But it was never going to let us leave. Hyunwoo felt panic rising in his chest as he understood their situation. The human crew programmed their ship's computer to trap anyone who came aboard. They turned their own vessel into a prison that no one could escape from. The scraping sound returned, this time moving through different ventilation ducts around them. It was louder now, more aggressive, as if whatever was making the noise knew that its prey was now trapped and helpless. "Captain," Wu Jin whispered, his voice barely audible, "I think we just became part of the human experiment, and I don't think we're going to survive it." The lights began dying one by one, starting from the far end of the corridor and moving steadily toward them. It wasn't a power failure. This was deliberate, systematic. Each section of lighting went dark with a soft electronic click, as if something was turning them off in sequence. The darkness crept closer like a slow-moving wave of black water, swallowing everything in its path. Captain Hyunwoo watched in growing terror as the wall of darkness approached their position. "Something is controlling the ship's lighting system," he whispered. "It knows exactly where we are." Wu Jin frantically adjusted his thermal scanner, his scaled hands trembling as he tried to make sense of the readings. The device was picking up heat signatures throughout the ship, but they weren't in the corridors where normal creatures would walk. Instead, they were moving through spaces that shouldn't have been able to hold anything larger than maintenance robots. "Captain, I'm reading at least 6 different heat sources," he reported, his voice cracking with fear. "They're in the air ducts, the maintenance crawlways, spaces between the walls. They're moving through the ship's infrastructure like they own it." The thermal readings showed the creatures were large, much larger than humans, but somehow they were squeezing through openings that should have been impossible for them to navigate. Even worse, they were coordinating their movements, surrounding the salvage team from multiple directions at once. Minji's plasma cutter ignited with a sharp hiss, casting bright blue light that pushed back the approaching darkness. The weapon was designed for cutting through ship hulls, but she held it like a sword, ready to defend herself against whatever was hunting them. What are these things? How can they move through such small spaces? The answer came from an unexpected source. A nearby wall terminal suddenly activated, displaying a human audio log that began playing automatically. The voice belonged to a human woman, speaking with professional calm despite the sounds of chaos and screaming, clearly audible in the background. Captain's log, final entry. Research day 851. The specimens have adapted far beyond our initial expectations. They have learned the layout of our ship better than we know it ourselves. They understand our daily routines, our shift changes, our emergency procedures. They know our weaknesses. The woman's voice remained steady, even as explosions and shouting grew louder behind her. "We have underestimated their intelligence. They are not just predators, they are problem solvers. They have figured out how to use our own ship against us. We cannot allow them to reach inhabited space. The risk to galactic civilization is too great." Scratching sounds began echoing from the walls all around them, coming from different directions at once. The noise was methodical, deliberate, like something sharpening its claws against metal. Whatever was making those sounds was taking its time, in no hurry to attack. It was patient, intelligent, and completely confident in its ability to kill them. Jinho's tentacles were curled tight against his body, a defensive posture his people only adopted when facing mortal danger. "They're not just hunting us. They're studying us first, learning how we move, how we react." The realization hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow to the stomach. The humans didn't abandon this ship when the creatures escaped. They stayed here deliberately. They made themselves into prison guards, sacrificing their own lives to keep these things contained. The scratching sounds grew closer, coming from directly above their heads now. The creatures were in the ceiling, probably looking down at them through ventilation grates, watching their every move. The human crew knew they were going to die, Minji said, her crystalline form flickering with understanding and respect. But they chose to die as protectors of the galaxy, rather than live as cowards who ran away. The darkness finally reached them, swallowing the last section of corridor lighting. Now only Minji's plasma cutter provided illumination, creating a small circle of blue light in an ocean of black. And somewhere in that darkness, ancient nightmares were getting ready to hunt. The armory doors opened to reveal something incredible that none of them had expected. This wasn't just a weapons storage room, it was the heart of an elaborate defensive system that the humans had built throughout their entire ship. The walls were covered with control panels, tactical displays and monitoring screens that showed every corridor, every room, every possible hiding place on the vessel. Captain Hyun Woo stared at the sophisticated setup in amazement. This is military-grade defense planning, but this was supposed to be a research ship. Jin-ho moved to one of the control interfaces, his tentacles dancing over the human controls as he figured out how the system worked. Captain, look at this. The humans didn't just add weapons to their ship, they redesigned the entire vessel into a trap. The displays showed incredible detail about the ship's modifications. Every corridor had been equipped with hidden force field generators that could create instant barriers. Emergency bulkheads could be activated to seal off sections within seconds. Even the ventilation system had been modified with automated defense, systems that could detect and respond to intruders. The life support systems can be controlled independently for each section, Jin-ho reported, his voice filled with admiration. They could cut off air, adjust temperature, even pump in sleep gas to specific areas. They turned their own home into a prison designed to contain the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Minji floated between weapon caches that had been carefully placed throughout the armory. Each cache was labeled with human names and personal messages written in their own language. She used her suit's translation system to read the heartbreaking notes the crew had left behind. This weapons cache was prepared by Engineer So-young, she read aloud. Her message says, "For my daughter Ji-woo so she never has to see these things." Another cache was set up by technician Tae-min, who wrote, "For my parents, who taught me that some things are worth dying for." Audio logs played automatically as they moved through the armory, telling the story of the crew's final days. The voices belonged to humans who knew they were preparing for their own deaths, but who worked with determination and courage that impressed even these hardened salvage operators. Personal log, Engineer So-young, day 8:45, one recording began. "We've been working for 6 days straight, modifying every system on the ship. We're exhausted, but we can't stop. If these creatures escape into the galaxy, billions of innocent people will die. We won't let that happen." Another voice, belonging to technician Tae-min, spoke with quiet resolve. "The escape pods are ready, but none of us are planning to use them. We've voted as a crew. We stay with the ship until the end. These creatures cannot be allowed to reach inhabited space." Woo Jin found the final crew manifest on a damaged computer terminal. His translation software worked to process the human text, revealing information that made everyone fall silent with respect. "Captain, every single human on this ship volunteered to stay when they could have evacuated. They had working escape, pods, functioning shuttles, multiple ways to leave safely." The communications officer continued reading, his scaled features showing deep emotion. But they chose to remain as guardians. The captain's final order was clear. "We are the last line of defense between these nightmares and galactic civilization. We will not abandon our post." Hyun-woo felt a profound sense of respect wash over him as he understood the full scope of human sacrifice. His species had always considered humans to be primitive, emotional, and impulsive. But this level of coordinated self-sacrifice for the greater good was something he had never seen before. "They didn't just build a ship," he said quietly, looking around at the evidence of human ingenuity and courage. "They built a promise that some things in the universe would never be allowed to harm innocent people." The realization changed everything about how the salvage team viewed their situation. They weren't just trapped on a derelict vessel. They were inside humanity's final gift to the galaxy. Captain Hyunwoo pressed his back against the bridge's reinforced wall, listening to the terrifying sounds coming from the other side of the blast doors. Something enormous was testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses with methodical intelligence that chilled him to the bone. Jin Ho and Woo Jin were gone, taken during their desperate flight through the ship's corridors. Now only he and Minji remained alive. The bridge was the most secure location on the human vessel, designed to withstand direct military assault. But even these massive doors were beginning to show stress fractures as whatever hunted them applied pressure in precisely the right places. The creatures had learned the ship's construction better than its own builders. Bridge force fields are down to 60% power, Minji reported, her crystalline form flickering with exhaustion and fear. She had been maintaining their defenses for hours, using her people's natural energy abilities to reinforce the human systems. But Captain, they're getting smarter with each attack. They're testing different approaches, learning from each failure. Through the security camera monitors, they caught brief glimpses of their hunters moving through the corridors outside. The creatures were unlike anything in galactic records, things that seemed to shift and change shape depending on the situation. They moved with fluid grace through spaces that should have been too small, then expanded to enormous size when they needed to apply brute force. They're not just evolved predators, Hyunwoo whispered, watching one of the creatures manipulate a control panel with appendages that looked almost like hands. They're problem solvers. They understand technology. The bridge's central command console still held the personal logs of the human captain who had commanded this vessel. Captain Lee Soo-jin had been a small woman with kind eyes, based on the eye photos scattered around her command station. Her final recording was still queued up on the main screen, waiting to be played. Hyunwoo activated the message as another thunderous impact shook the blast doors. Captain Soo-jin's image appeared, her face calm despite the chaos visible behind her on the bridge. To whoever finds this ship, my name is Captain Lee Soo-jin of the research vessel Eternal Promise. If you are hearing this message, then we have failed to contain the specimens, and you are probably going to die. The human captain's voice remained steady as explosions echoed in the background of her recording. These creatures cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with, cannot be contained by anything except complete destruction. We tried everything else first. We became their cage so that the galaxy could remain free. The blast doors began to buckle inward as something applied tremendous force from the other side. Hyunwoo could see claw marks appearing in the reinforced metal, gouged deep by appendages that could tear through military-grade armor. "Captain, I'm activating the long-range transmitter," he said, working frantically at the communications console. "If we're going to die here, at least the galaxy will know what happened. Other salvage crews need to understand why human ships are forbidden." Minji moved to the ship's self-destruct console, her crystalline hands hovering over controls that would end everything. "The humans designed this system to require 2 operators," she said. "They never wanted anyone to trigger it accidentally or in a moment of panic." The blast doors finally gave way with a screaming sound of tortured metal. Shapes moved in the darkness beyond, things that hurt to look at directly. But Hyunwoo felt no fear anymore, only a deep respect for the humans who had faced this same moment months ago. "For the galaxy," he said, placing his hand on his half of the self-destruct sequence. The words came from a human log he had read earlier, spoken by Captain Soo-jin in her final moments. "For the galaxy," Minji agreed, her form blazing with brilliant light as she activated her portion of the sequence. The creatures rushed forward, but they were too late. Humanity's final gift was about to be delivered. The message beacon shot out from the Eternal Promise like a brilliant star, carrying Hyunwoo's final transmission into the depths of space. Just 3 seconds later, the human research vessel exploded. In a flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away, the ship that had been home to so many brave humans became their final monument, taking with it the nightmares that should never have been allowed to exist. Hyunwoo's last recording spread through galactic communication networks faster than anyone could have imagined. Every space station, every trading post, every salvage depot received the transmission within days. The story it told was unlike anything the galaxy had heard before. "This is Captain Hyunwoo of the salvage vessel Starseeker," his voice said from countless speakers across civilized space. "We violated the galactic salvage codes and boarded a human ship called the Eternal Promise. We thought we understood why human vessels were forbidden. We were wrong." The recording went on to describe everything they had discovered: the escaped creatures, the human crew's sacrifice, the ship turned into a prison. But more than that, it revealed something about humanity that other species had never truly understood. "The humans on that ship could have escaped," Hyunwoo's voice continued. "They had working shuttles, functional escape pods, multiple ways to save themselves, but they chose to stay and die rather than let those creatures reach populated space. They turned themselves into guardians of the galaxy." Within weeks, the story had become legend among spacefaring races. It was told in 1,000 different languages on 1,000,000 different worlds. Children learned it in school. Experienced spacers shared it in cantinas and crew quarters. The tale of the Eternal Promise became part of galactic culture. The story changed how other species viewed humans completely. Before, many had seen them as primitive newcomers to the galaxy, emotional, impulsive creatures who relied on luck more than skill. But the Eternal Promise revealed something different about human nature that was both inspiring and terrifying. Humans didn't just build ships for exploration or trade like other species did. They built them as promises. Every human vessel carried with it an unspoken oath that its crew would protect innocent life no matter the cost. They were willing to transform their own homes into tombs if that's what it took to keep the galaxy safe. The Zephyrian Council updated their salvage training manuals to include Hyunwoo's story. The Crystalline Federation added it to their cultural archives. Even the warlike Avalonian Empire took note, recognizing a form of courage they had never encountered before. Spaceports across the galaxy began carving the galactic salvage codes into their walls in permanent stone, rather than displaying them on simple digital screens. Rule 1 was written in dozens of languages, but it always said the same thing: never enter a human ship. But now everyone understood the real reason for the rule. It wasn't because humans were territorial or aggressive. It wasn't because they guarded valuable technology or treasures. The rule existed because human ships contained something far more dangerous than any weapon. They contained people who were absolutely certain that some things were worth dying for. That certainty, that willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers they would never meet, terrified every other species in the galaxy. Not because it was evil, but because it was so completely selfless that it challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and self-preservation. The legend of the Eternal Promise ensured that human ships would remain untouched forever, not out of fear of human anger, but out of respect for human sacrifice, and perhaps, if other species were honest with themselves, out of shame that they weren't sure they could make the same choice. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute conviction that protecting others was more important than protecting themselves, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy.